Fox News alert. Well, it is a big day on Capitol Hill where we are awaiting new information on the Republican plan for tax reform. Moments ago, the Senate Finance Committee revealing its version of a tax bill to Republicans behind closed doors. But details are leaking out. This as the House Ways and Means Committee is expected to put out its version of a tax bill today. We'll tell you where everything stands as we get it. This is Outnumbered. I'm Sandra Smith, and here today, the host of Hannity on Fox Business, Hannity, Republican strategist and Fox News contributor Lisa Booth, former deputy spokesperson for the Senate State Department Marie Harf, slip of the tongue there, and today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, Fox News legal analyst and host of Bob Massey is the property man. Bob Massey is here, and we're so glad to have you. You are outnumbered. Slip of the tongue there because we're waiting on details of that Senate plan to be released. This making it a very big moment for this country.
It is very much so, and in listening to some of the things that Paul Ryan talked about, minutia, and it's somewhat complicated. And when you look about one of the things that concerns me, some of the things I heard was this possible delay of 1 year before something happens. You look at the market, I don't know, it was down 140 points. You wonder, well, what are these businesses thinking? 1 year, he said the president wants it now. They're saying possible 1 year. That's concerning.
All right, well, you set it up for us. Let's get right to it. The Senate Finance Committee unveiling an outline of its tax reform plan behind closed doors, and it's reportedly very different from the House version, setting up a potential battle within the GOP. With President Trump's first major legislative victory hanging in the balance, House Speaker Paul Ryan says he's not concerned.
We write a bill, they write a bill, we pass a bill, they pass a bill, we go to a conference committee, iron out the differences. That's how laws are written all the time. We negotiated, we being the House, with the Senate and the President all summer, early fall, to produce a bill that works inside the framework, and both the House and the Senate bill will do that.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting President Trump told a gathering of Democratic senators this week, you're going to like the Senate version a whole lot more than the House version. And just a short time ago, I spoke to Republican Senator Marco Rubio, who said there will be big differences, including one very controversial proposal.
It'll be different from the House. One of the things I know that'll be different is the state and local taxes exemption. You know, in Florida, when I do my taxes, I get to write off my property tax, a portion of the sales tax if you're itemizing. And a lot of people are upset about that, but that it's going to go away. But what really matters is how much do you pay at the end of the day? When you do your taxes, how much do you pay? And so while that may be going away, there are other things that are going up. And the combination of those two changes is going to lead most, if not the vast overwhelming majority of Americans who need a tax cut are going to get one.
He said he's cautiously optimistic as we await the details to come out of the Senate. And we just wonder, how far apart are the House and Senate in this?
Well, as it relates to the local taxes, it seems to me that it's geographically driven, because if you take California, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, that could be very important. But if you take a state like Nevada, where we literally, our property taxes are very affordable, we don't really look at that if I'm going to buy property. But those in higher areas, cost areas, it could have a major impact. It could be basically, it could end it.
Hannity, what are you looking for here? What stands out to you as we wait more details?
And the shell game. And the shell game, because, you know, you're telling people that you're going to reduce their taxes. You're going to lower their payments. They're going to have more money. And that may be true in some regard, but all they're doing is really looking for other ways to raise taxes on both sides. And that's what you're seeing with the SALT deductions. Yep. You know, and you can make the case that it's not right for certain states to have this incentive to raise these local taxes. You've got really irresponsible governors and lawmakers in places like New York and California, and they have no reason to keep taxes low. Maybe this will put some burden on them if they see wealthy people leaving their state and relocating their businesses and their homes to places like Nevada and Florida. Other than that, I think we need to go to a fair tax, a flatter tax. Stop the deductions, stop the nonsense, stop the shell game. Bottom line, though, cut spending. Neither is bold enough to do it.
I want to get the sound of Robert Reich in here, of him slamming the GOP tax plan, and then go to Marie Harf on this.
The most important thing right now is to make sure that the tax cut does not ever reach the light of day. That is what that whole tax cut is just a giant corporate tax cut. The middle class is going to be hurt. The very wealthiest members of our society are going to come out even better than they are doing right now, which is better than they've ever done in history. There should never have been this tax cut on the agenda.
The former labor secretary not making his opinions on this a secret.
He never does. And look, I think that people are concerned that there are parts of the middle class that will actually see their taxes go up and that there's still this huge revenue shortfall. It's exactly what Kennedy was saying. The GOP has not outlined this revenue shortfall and how they will actually bridge that gap. Politically speaking, just staying on the state and local tax, Darrell Issa of California yesterday, who almost lost last year his House seat, came out yesterday against this. This is far from a political done deal. The Senate and the House version are going to be very far apart. A conference will push this weeks and weeks, probably past the new year.
Well, I think to Speaker Paul Ryan's point, this is a process, right? So the House is still in their process. Obviously, the Senate's going to lay out their version of the bill. And then, as Marie stated, they're going to go to conference. So we're still at the beginning of this process, but there are concerns. Obviously, Marie had mentioned the deficit. These are concerns that Senator Langford and Bob Corker have also expressed. I imagine Senator Flake has similar concerns. There's also been concerns over the SALT deductions as well. People in high tax states, New York, New Jersey, California. There's also been concerns of small business communities expressing the fact that 90% of businesses aren't even going to be benefit by the 25% rate. So I think there are a lot of concerns.
You mean the pass-through rate?
The pass-through rate, yeah. But there's a lot of concerns to be addressed here. And ultimately, in the House and the Senate, it's going to be about getting to a majority vote and being able to get it done in the House and Senate.
So you set it up. The stakes are high. Some Republicans see tax reform as an absolute must-do after the big Election Day losses on Tuesday. For Republicans, Chairman Orrin Hatch, whose committee would write the tax legislation, says the recent elections could make it harder to get the bill passed, telling the Washington Post, quote, "I mean, it could because the elections went against the Republicans." House Speaker Paul Ryan says the results are just a reminder to get to work.
It doesn't change my reading of the current moment. It just emphasizes my reading of the current moment, which is we have a promise to keep. We got to get on with keeping our promise. And one of the chief promises we made when we ran for office, all of us, whether it's the president or Congress in 2016, was that we would do tax reform and tax cuts for families, for people. And so we have to get on with doing that.
Meanwhile, a source close to the White House reportedly not sharing the speaker's optimism. The Hill reporting that this administration insider thinks Republicans lost because the Republican-controlled Congress is not getting anything done. So, Bob, just how important is it?
You know what? I'm so burnt out hearing that same kind of thing from them. It's like, can't you just get together and figure this out and make it work? People are tired of this, man. It's like, this is what you wanted, you got it, and they're like a bunch of kids, and nobody, there's so much toxicity, if you will, that they just can't communicate clearly and trying to make it happen. And what we've learned since the election, really, I always say it's like a Pandora's box that went off, and everything has gone in every different direction. But I got to tell you, from the part of the country I'm from, and Republicans, they are fed up. They don't want to hear about it. They're tired of excuses. They want to see something get done. And look, I'm not a finance guy, but you ladies have more background than I do. My question is this. On this tax plan, is it possible, instead of taking like 15 different things to make it happen, because is it possible to take maybe one or two things and see, can we make that happen and then maybe build from there?
That's something they discussed in the Senate, was sort of taking apart. And if you want to do one thing, and I know you and I have talked about this, Sandra, if there's one thing that you're going to do that's going to have the most meaningful impact, regardless of what former Secretary Reich has to say, it's lower that corporate tax rate to 20%. Lower that. That will have the biggest impact. You will see the economy grow from there. And then once you have a victory, if you do want to take it apart, then you can go ahead with confidence and tackle the other stuff, perhaps when voters actually trust you.
And real quick, give me a capital gains tax reduction. Because I'm going to tell you something. In the real estate world, you lower that capital gains tax, and you're going to see property soar. They're going to sell, they're going to build, they're going to develop.
Wait, I'll tell you something. With Marie sitting here, Democrats don't want to hear that.
Well, and I'm not sure voters want to hear that, right? I think it will be hard for Republicans to run on. We cut the corporate tax rate, we cut the capital gains tax, if middle-class families aren't seeing more money in their wallets. And I think the Republicans...
Middle-class families work for corporations as well.
Right.
And more of them will work for corporations if more corporations can hire people.
There is an open debate about, one second, Lisa, about how long it will take for middle-class families to feel that. And I think Republicans are struggling right now between, is it worse politically to do nothing or to do something bad that's unpopular? That's the question. And the House feels electoral pressure much more than the Senate. The Senate does not feel the same pressure.
Well, you're right. I mean, there is a pressure here from, someone who's worked in political politics. I mean, this is what my career has been in. But there is this immense pressure because the concern with Virginia, nobody's surprised that Democrats won a trending blue state. I mean, congratulations. That was exactly what was supposed to happen. I'm not. That's exactly what was supposed to happen. But the problem is that Democrats were energized. And we saw that in the electorate, and we saw that in the numbers of the Democrats that turned out. And so the problem heading into the midterm elections, and the concern for Republicans, is that Republicans are going to sit home because they are not motivated. And the Democrats are very, very motivated. And you are motivated when you're in the minority. And so that is the biggest concern. And if Republicans don't get Obamacare done, which they haven't, if they don't get tax reform done, what is the motivation for people to turn out?
Segment with, and that was that the president apparently on that phone call with Democrats, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that he said Democrats are going to like this Senate plan.
That's terrifying because that means that it's a big government, high spending plan that's also going to kowtow to Nancy Pelosi and her demagoguery. All they're doing is running around saying this is just a tax cut for the rich. Ask rich people. No, it's not.
Well, and
they're terrified of what's going to happen.
Republicans on the Hill are also really scared of having a repeat of what happened on Obamacare, where President Trump kept changing his mind about what his red lines were, where publicly he would say things that would really undercut their negotiating position. So exactly when he says this to Democrats, you're going to like it better than the House version.
Does that make you happy?
House Republicans, it doesn't really make me sad or happy. I think for House Republicans, it scares them.
Oh my gosh, you love Donald Trump.
I think Bob Massey hit the nail on the head when you said they're all just a bunch of babies. Because I think if you collectively take all the comments that have been on the couch, that's essentially what we've all been saying.
You really can't make this group of people up. I have to tell you. I mean, it's just they really are ridiculous. I guess what it's shown is this swamp is deeper than Trump ever believed. I believe that, number one.
And he's not fixing it.
Well, okay. He's been in there a year. Come on, let's not get to the other guy. But the bottom line is, I just look at this. I disagree with you about the capital gains of that. Let me tell you something. If you do certain things, I will guarantee you when people start seeing that there's more jobs and companies, then they're going to say, I understand it took time, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
But you got to understand the people with money, they want to grow their business.
Absolutely.
They want to employ people. And I never met a poor person that could employ anybody in my lifetime. So all I'm saying is...
Poor people vote, though.
I understand that.
So that's the key question. That's the key question.
All right, we'll leave it there. Nail on the head. Was that a pun? You were talking to a real estate guy.
It actually wasn't, but you make me sound so much smarter. Yes, it was.
I received it well.
By the way, you probably noticed my co-host Harris Faulkner is not sitting next to me at this very moment. That's because she is in our nation's capital, and on Overtime today, she will be sitting down with Counselor to the President Kellyanne Conway. They will be discussing the big push to pass tax reform and the president's role in it. That is at the top of the hour, so do not miss that. All right, well, a new bombshell in the probe into Hillary Clinton's emails. The red flags some in the CIA reportedly raised to James Comey as he was deciding whether or not Hillary should be prosecuted. The new questions this raises. Plus, talking tough on North Korea, President Trump's blunt message to China on what that country can do to help ease the crisis. But is China listening?
The entire civilized world must unite to confront the North Korean menace.
When it comes to Hillary Clinton's emails, former FBI Director James Comey softened the language in his memo exonerating Hillary's handling of classified information, even after CIA officials said they were damaging to the agency. This according to summaries of FBI interviews. One CIA official calling whoever sent one email, quote, an idiot, writing that even though they knew better, quote, their actions hurt the CIA and other agencies whose equities were conveyed in the emails. The timing of the interviews is significant because they're written within the time frame when Comey edited language on Hillary's actions from, quote, grossly negligent to extremely careless. That distinction is very important because grossly negligent, as you may remember, is a crime punishable under law. So you are, in fact, a lawyer.
Yes.
So when you hear about this and you see that the language was in fact changed and softened, what's the first thing that goes through your head?
Could I just make one comment? I've come to the conclusion as it relates to the Clintons, they must have something on everybody because really, honestly, I mean, grossly negligent is a criminal. It's a civil word and it's a criminal word.
So is extremely careless, says Judge.
I have no idea what that means. Okay, legally, I don't know what that means. And
but
I think
grossly negligent falls in a specific legal definition.
Absolutely.
If you are guilty of gross negligence,
then there's culpability.
Yeah.
extreme carelessness, I don't know, kids are extremely careless whenever they do certain things, but an adult, if you do something, you're grossly negligent. Or in fact, it's
intentional. But if you're extremely careless with classified information, that falls under the same category.
Right. As it should.
That's also not good. I don't think most people think Jim Comey was trying to help Hillary Clinton based on his public actions, both when he said they weren't charging her, but then reprimanded her publicly, and then when he said they were reopening the case in October. So look, the FBI looked at all the information, including interviews with CIA folks, some of my former colleagues who dealt with this, including people at the State Department, including other people. They came to the conclusion as an agency that she should not be charged. Now, we can disagree with that.
They came to that conclusion before they interviewed her and before they interviewed some of the critical witnesses in her inner circle who were given these sketchy immunity deals. They stand by it because they're trying to cover their arses. Lisa Booth.
Maybe there isn't enough evidence.
I also think that the majority of Americans believe that if her name was Marie Harf, she would be prosecuted and fired from the job.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the sentiment of the majority of Americans. And I think the biggest joke of the election cycle is that Hillary Clinton was running to be commander-in-chief, criticized the president or then candidate Donald Trump's ability to do the job, and she so recklessly put her national security at risk with top secret information on a server as secure as Gmail, traveling on international soil. And then she also has the audacity to try to say that countries like Russia have the goods on Donald Trump, when she, of course, every country has information on her and our country, also probably putting our CIA officials and our military men and women at risk with that information that was on her server.
It sounds like perhaps Hillary Clinton has a different set of rules. Thank goodness last May, our own Catherine Herridge asked the former FBI director that very question. Watch.
Can you assure people that Mrs. Clinton and her team are being held to the same standard and that there isn't a special set of rules because they are powerful and politically connected?
I'm not going to comment, other than to say there are no special set of rules for anybody that the FBI investigates.
I don't know, Sandra. Seems like there's a special set of rules.
I mean, that is the feeling that we're left here with. I don't know. I think this is what leads to this complete distrust in Washington. You see this happening, and it's changing of the language and a letter being crafted before it was even time. And it's just, you put it all together and you just fear what's really going on.
You know, I've listened to legal experts who specialize in this area that say that we probably would be in cuffs, okay? We probably would already have an indictment. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that there is this optics, whether it's real or not, that these people have always had a separate set of rules for many, many years. And that the average American man and woman would, in fact, have some legal consequence, and that they continue. And she goes to foreign countries and bashes our president, here, gets applauses on night shows, and I'm saying to myself, you can't just make this kind of stuff up. What is it that we're missing? What is it we're missing on this deal?
Well, you know, we're missing a giant foundation that launders millions and millions and millions of dollars.
And also does really good work all around the world, too. Look, I'm not going to defend Hillary Clinton till my face turns blue, as you all know.
Dress?
Exactly. I have criticized her when I think she's warranted of it. Yeah. But, some of this is hyperbole. Some of this is taking it beyond where the evidence shows. And look, 2016's over. She's not the future of the party.
Some of it may be, but most of it leads to a very logical conclusion, which is Hillary Clinton was certainly guilty of something and was let off the hook because there was a different set of rules.
We don't even know she was guilty, though. I think it led to a perception among...
she was guilty.
I think it led to a perception among voters.
Maria, as much as I would love to continue this discussion, unfortunately, there are people in my ear. My therapist is trying very hard to hear me at that.
Former telling you no and your mind saying yes.
Speaking of people who were terrified of Hillary Clinton, former Vice President Joe Biden dishing in a new memoir, he says that he could have beaten Hillary Clinton in the primary, but one of the things that held him back, fear of what her opposition research team might do to him. And it's still up in the air, but the president may meet with Vladimir Putin. The White House saying when it comes to dealing with the North Korean nuke threat, we should talk to everyone. So will he? And should he? We will debate in moments. Stay right here.
Time is quickly running out. I'm also calling on Russia to help rein in this potentially very tragic situation.
President Trump wrapping wrapping up what has been an eventful trip to China. He heads to Vietnam tonight and applying new pressure on Beijing to sever ties with North Korea.
The entire civilized world must unite to confront the North Korean menace. We discussed our mutual commitment to the complete denuclearization of North Korea. We agreed not to replicate failed approaches of the past, and there were many. All responsible nations must join together to stop arming and financing and even trading with the murderous North Korean regime.
China's president also speaking out against a nuclear North Korea, but sounding non-committal on sanctions. Meanwhile, President Trump also hoping for progress on the U.S.-China trade deficit, saying he blames it on previous administrations, not China.
We want a vibrant trade relationship with China. We also want a fair and reciprocal one. Today, I discussed with President Xi concrete steps that we'll jointly take to solve the problem of the massive trade distortion.
And as President Trump heads to Vietnam for a summit of Asian nations, many are wondering if he'll meet there one-on-one with Vladimir Putin. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson saying the idea is still under consideration. Apparently, the State Department saying it just depends on what they decide that they can talk about. What that is would determine whether or not they sit down. Anyway, Bob Massey.
Well, you know, the North Korean thing is complicated, and this guy obviously is a real dictator, and Trump keeps pushing the envelope as far as it can. But I think, I'm not an expert in international relations, but from what it appears, you need to have China involved. You got to have South. There has to be a cooperative effort here in order to make it. But I like the pushback. I want the pushback. Question is this guy crazy enough really to do something, or is he just? If I've ever seen a dictator, this guy looks like a dictator. You know, he really does. I mean, he just fits the image.
Yeah. Would you like to see the president sit down with Vladimir Putin, Marie?
Under the right circumstances, yes. I think that the U.S. and Russia have to talk to each other. You know, I've never been concerned about the U.S. trying to work with Russia when it's in our interest to do so. I'm more concerned about Donald Trump and this administration not being willing to push the Russians on issues where I think they should, like going back to 2016 for a second, on election hacking, like Russian activities in Syria. Things Russia's doing that we don't like, I haven't seen enough pushback yet. But on North Korea, absolutely. And the proof from this trip, I think, will be what are the tangible takeaways, right? The comments have been good in China. It'll be interesting to see what happens at the Asian summit. But he needs to come home with some tangible takeaways for how to increase the pressure on North Korea. We just haven't seen those yet. But Russia can certainly play a role.
Do you think the president's making progress with China, Kennedy?
I do think he's making progress with China, and I think it was actually a very smart orchestration, starting in Japan, where we've got a strong alliance. I thought he gave a great speech in South Korea and, you know, showed the contrast between South Korean success and the North Korean murderous dictatorship and how people suffer and die under that regime. And now he's moving on to China. Sometimes I think he gets a little too enamored there, but he realizes how much money there is and how our economies are so inextricably linked. But to Marie's point, yeah, he could be a little bit more firm. And absolutely, there has to be discussion with Russia about North Korea. And also, they need to be held accountable for their relationship with Iran and Iran's relationship with North Korea.
Lisa?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with him sitting down with Vladimir Putin. They're both world leaders. I mean, it makes sense. So, you know, and on the China front, yes, of course, we hope that he's putting pressure on China and China enforces the UN sanctions and China goes and takes additional actions against North Korea. And I think at some point, you know, President Trump has sort of tried to build this relationship, tried to develop, you know, sort of the carrot approach. And at some point, if China doesn't play ball, maybe we should look at further sanctioning Chinese banks, individuals who do business with North Korea legally or illegally. So, you know, I think there's also an aspect of when do you start playing hardball with China if they don't help us.
All right. Well, as we mentioned, Harris is in D.C. today. She's going to be joined by Counselor to the President Kellyanne Conway. They will be discussing the president's big trip and that possible meeting that we've been discussing with Vladimir Putin. Check it out on Outnumbered Overtime at the top of the hour.
Well, as you know, members of both parties now pushing for a fix to save the so-called Dreamers program, which protects undocumented immigrants brought to the U.S. as children from deportation. House Republicans earlier saying it's time to find a solution, as it appears a Dreamers fix will not be added to an end-of-the-year spending bill. Watch this.
We're talking about human beings. We're talking about innocent people who are, through no fault of their own, through no decision of their own, they're here in a very precarious position. So we have the obligation, not just the opportunity, the obligation to rectify this, working together, showing the American people that Congress can work, that we can get something done.
We in Congress need to provide a humane, permanent, and constitutional solution to this issue.
However, Republicans remain divided over a path to citizenship. Meantime, Senate Democrats are calling to add protections for Dreamers to the spending bill as they look to seize on the issue ahead of the midterms. Watch this.
Right now, there are more than 800 Dreamers currently serving in the United States military. If Congress fails to pass the DREAM Act, these young people could be forced to leave the military and be placed at risk of being deported from the country they have volunteered to serve.
Our nation is not as strong as it is today in spite of our immigrant families. It is as strong as it is today because of our immigrant families.
All right, Lisa, but there seems to be a lot of agreement that something has to be done about the Dreamers. What are the biggest details that are holding Republicans back?
Well, I think you mentioned the divide in the Republican Party, but I also think that the Democrat Party is going to be split on this issue as well. We saw what happened to Ralph Northam the other day. We saw Nancy Pelosi and protesters going after her about immigration as well. So I don't think that there's going to be a divide with Republicans solely on this issue. I think there's also going to be a divide among Democrats. And I think if you're President
Trump... So what about
Trump,
that path to citizenship, though?
Well, I think if you're President Trump, he would be... I think the Republican Party or President Trump would be foolish to not ask for something like the RAISE Act to be included as part of, any sort of DREAM Act being passed in Congress, because this is President Trump's opportunity to get something done on immigration. The RAISE Act is something that he endorsed with Senators Cotton and Perdue. So now sort of the time, if he really wants to see that through, to try to attach it to any sort of, pathway to citizenship.
However, Marie, immigration was not a winning issue for Ed Gillespie. So, and that may not be top of mind for a lot of Republican voters in these critical states. So what is to be done?
Well, look, Bob Gates has an interesting piece. Former Defense Secretary Bob Gates, who's a Republican, has an interesting piece in the New York Times today about this exact issue, where he says, currently there are over 800 Dreamers serving in our armed forces. The Dreamers served when he was Secretary of Defense. And he calls not just for a new DREAM Act, but for a path to citizenship. That, I think...
Unique to those serving in the military. Because if you wear the uniform and you're willing to defend our freedom, I think that puts you in an entirely different category. I don't think you'd have a lot of opposition from Republicans.
So I think the path to citizenship, though, politically is going to be the toughest thing that Republicans and even Democrats probably can't agree on. And this is just something that I don't know if it's a political winner or not. I don't know if voters vote on it, but it's the right thing to do. And the fact that Republicans like Peter King are saying so is a drastic political shift from even a few years ago, and says to me we might actually be able to get something done.
You've heard a lot of people in the business community speak out and have very strong opinions when it comes to DACA. I just wonder, your perspective must certainly be different when it comes to this as well, Bob.
Well, I'm 100% for doing something for the DACA. I really am. I just think that these children, when they were born here, they were victims of those people that came over illegally. There was that old philosophy, well, if their parents are illegal, they should be illegal. I don't agree with that. Don't forget, the immigration issue, we're impacted very much in the southwest part of our country because we have so many immigrants that came there, and a lot of Mexican Americans now that are living there, those who did become naturalized citizens, and those who are DACA. I think everybody has to clean this up and make it happen, make a pathway to citizenship, make it reasonable, and make it happen.
Yeah, but that's the sticking point. It's the amnesty, because blanket amnesty is something that, obviously is a huge issue for those who put President Trump in office.
It is. I don't disagree with that. I just think that those people who were victims of this and are innocent deserve some type of pathway.
And there's a great deal of empathy there. The question is, how do you deal with these people? You can't deport them
and there
if
can
they're
be a
not
path
going
to citizenship that's not blanket amnesty too.
these people, you're telling me we could probably sit down in a day and try to figure something out.
Let's
but
do
these
it.
people will complicate it because of their policy decisions and worried about votes here and there. These are kids that were born here that did nothing wrong, and we got to figure it out. And by the way, get this issue behind us because I think there's more important
Wouldn't
issues.
it be refreshing if they legislated like they didn't care if they lost? How different would our world be?
It's true.
Well, speaking of former President Bill Clinton, he appeared to lump President Trump in with so-called Dictators Club. What?
The Dictators Club in the world. And there's a bunch of them.
Are you talking about foreign countries now or here?
Oh, silence. It is deafening. Either that or he just had a senior moment and couldn't remember. Conan O'Brien asking him to clarify his remark, whether this is just more sour grapes from the Clintons for that election day loss. And Joe Biden saying he knew he could have beaten Hillary Clinton in the primary, but that he decided not to run because he knew her campaign would stop at nothing. How Democrats will react to these claims and what that could mean for 2020. Stay here.
Yo, check it out, dog. That was just all right for me. I mean, you got the walk, you got the stance, but I wasn't really feeling it. You know what? I'm not buying this. I gotta